Hey there, and thanks for tuning in. Today I'm going to bring you 10 of my favorite recent projects that you can create on your own. Now, most of these projects are small, most of them don't require any kind of special skills or tools, and many of them can be made with scrap wood material. Now, there are a couple of projects that I create using my CNC, and in several of these videos, I include extra features or add-ons or customizations that you can add if you do have a CNC or laser engraver. Now, make sure you check out the description down below because I'm going to include chapters. So if you don't want to watch this entire video, you can see the different projects that we're making and feel free to jump around. And then also, I'm going to include links to some of the tools and equipment that I use down in the description. So if you see anything that strikes your fancy or anything that's interesting to you, make sure to check those out. Today, we're going to take a look at a simple project that you can create with offcuts or scrap material. You never have to waste that scrap material again because you can use these little pieces to create small projects that you can sell or give away. I'm going to create it on a CNC, but you can easily create it with a bandsaw or a scroll saw. We're going to look at a series of small projects in the coming weeks that you can use to create your presence out there in the world. And they're things that we're going to create with offcuts, with scrap materials, so you can get more bang from your buck and not have a bunch of extra wood to throw away. So let's go ahead and dig right in. Okay, so for this particular project, we're going to start off with a piece of scrap, which is 14 inches by 6 inches. Now, to you, that may or may not be scrap, but the point is this is actually going to be two separate pieces. So all we really need is about 12 inches by 2 inches, which I would consider a scrap. Now, I'm actually not sure exactly what kind of wood this is. This is just a piece that I acquired. Seems to have a fairly loose grain. I'm wondering if it's some type of oak or walnut, but I'm not positive. I'm really not an expert on wood species. I mainly work with cherry, walnut, and then softwoods like pine and cedar. So if you have any idea what this one might be, let me know. Leave a comment down below. Okay, so I'm going to use some CA glue and tape to hold my material down since I am going to be cutting through. I'm also going to reinforce it with some screws. Go ahead and probe the X, Y, and Z. This part's optional, but I do recommend probing X, Y, and Z, at least the Z. And let's go ahead and start making the cuts. So for the first part, we're going to cut all the way through. Now this part's optional, but I think it's a neat little accent to put on there. And let's take out these extra pieces, which you can throw on the floor and use them to wake yourself up in the morning. Now let's go ahead and actually start cutting out our trivet. Now I did make one mistake right here. I originally designed this piece as 1/2 inch thick, and then I used a 3/4 inch board. Now the little dados that you see right in the middle have to be the width of your board. And it's at this point that I realized that I made a mistake. So now I'm going to go back to my software and I'm just going to create a couple of rectangles that are slightly wider. Now since the board is 3/4 inch, I recommend that you actually make those dados about 0.77, 0.78 inches thick, so they're slightly wider. Hey, and before we go any further, I do hope you'll take a moment and subscribe, leave a comment, and hit the like button down below. Likes, subscriptions, and comments are YouTube's way of knowing that you value this type of content, and it encourages YouTube to actually promote that content out there, which helps me to promote and grow this channel at no cost to you. All right, so since we still have everything placed on our spoil board, all we have to do is run this extra little piece, and that's going to give us that wider dado that we need right there. So these pieces will just seamlessly come right together. Now it's time to remove them from the spoil board, clean them up. Now let's just take them over to our spindle sander, clean them up a little bit. And I still like to use these little pads to give them a nice little individual sanding to get any kind of loose ends. And they fit together just like this. Now, also, I'm placing a link to the SVG files for this particular project below. If you'd like to create it with a CNC, you can take those SVG files, create your toolpaths, and create this project. If you'd like to create a template for it for use with a bandsaw or a scroll saw, you can also print out those SVG files and use them for that purpose as well. Hey there, thanks for sticking around this long. At this point, I would like to ask you to hit that subscribe button down below. That really supports this channel, shows YouTube that this is valuable content, and better than that, it doesn't cost you a thing. So as I'm finishing up a few last-minute Christmas projects for family and friends, I decide on a whim to make this simple book caddy. I meant it as no more than a project to practice my woodworking skills and work on those challenging triangles. Well, once I got it finished, I posted a picture out to my personal Facebook page, and then it happened. Like, love, comment. Then the orders started coming in. This project has become one of the simplest and best sellers that I've had all year. So today we're going to talk about this project and how to create it. Now, it's a simple design. It's just a triangle. But getting those perfect triangles can be challenging. So I'm going to show you a simple jig that we can use to get perfect angles every time so that this is easy to replicate. In addition, we'll talk about how I price these. And for those of you who come by for my CNC and laser related content, I'll show you a couple of advanced features if you want to take it to the next level and make this stand out from the pack. First thing we need to do is cut our wood down to length. You're going to need a 12-inch piece that's going to serve as your base, and then you're going to need two 7-inch pieces that will be the two parts of your book caddy. I'm actually creating two of them right now, because I'm going to show you a CNC version and a conventional version. And in hindsight, I shouldn't have cut these down quite as short. I should have planed them first, because passing these small pieces through the planer is not the best idea. Now, you will see a little bit of cupping in these boards, and to fix that, I'll simply pass them with the cup side down to get a flat edge, and then flip it over and plane the other side. So it'll get rid of all that cupping, no problem. Now, this isn't a CNC video specifically, but for those of you who come from my CNC content, I'm going to show you this version. I'm going to pass this V-bit and just do one circle. It's going to be a little accent where the cup holder goes. And then I'll switch over to my end mill. While the end mill is going, I'm going to cut down my base. Now, this is for the conventional version. It needs to be 4 inches wide. Now, how are we going to get that angle perfectly? I'm going to set my table saw to 22.5 degrees. Then I'm going to use this simple little jig to cut that angle. Now, because of the fact that that wood is going to be cut to a sharp angle and can slip down into your clearance plate, I recommend that you clamp it on there. Now that we have both long edges, now all we need to do is move our fence back and use that exact same angle to cut the angle for the base. Next, I'm going to take it to my laser engraver, and I'm going to engrave the personalization. This particular customer wanted a quote from C.S. Lewis, which I thought was really cool. And then we're going to glue it up. Now, I fumble through this. There's actually a better way. I'll show you a jig that I created right at the end of the video. But for this particular glue up, I'm just using some wood glue and then also some CA glue so that it sets up very quickly. But like I said, you'll easily be able to see a jig that will do a better job than what I've done right here. Then we just simply need to glue it to our base using that same method, and we're good to go. Now, to actually hold it in place while it dries, I use a strap clamp. If you have heavy-duty rubber bands, that would actually work in a situation like this. But really the best solution I'm going to show you in just a moment is to create a simple little jig and a V that will allow the V to sit down inside of it, and that glue will dry just by gravity and a little bit of pressure. And then you can actually put the base on upside down. Now, once everything's dry, you may not get your edges perfect, so I'm going to use a simple little hand plane to plane off those edges and give it a smooth finish right there. And the top is pretty sharp. There's a chance that little pieces could break off over time, so I'm going to put a little bit of a flat edge right there on top, and it looks beautiful once it's done. Let's finish it off by getting the other side. So let's talk about how you're going to get this triangle and how to get this angle. Now, when I glued this up, I did fumble through it as you saw. That glue was not very clean, but that can easily be fixed and corrected by creating a template, which is what I'm going to do next. All that you need to do is create that same angle using a piece of scrap wood, and you'll definitely want to put it on a base, which I haven't done yet, but then you can just simply drop the book holder into it and then place your base upside down and let gravity and a little bit of pressure do the work for you. So, how does it work? It's a simple book caddy. You've got a bookmark, a place for your coffee or tea, and a place to put your reading glasses. This was a simple project that I didn't think a thing about. I posted it out just because I thought it was a fun project, and I immediately started getting orders. And it takes approximately 1 board foot of wood, which costs between $5 and $9 a board foot, depending on what type of hardwood that I use. I sell these for $35 in maple, $40 in walnut, and I'll use my X-Tool D1 laser engraver to offer free personalization to any customer. So now let's talk about a couple of the ways that you can customize this and how this can actually be used. First of all, this one is made using conventional woodworking tools that should be in pretty much any woodworker's shop. And then this one is created using my CNC. And the only thing that I've done is I've created an actual circle for the coffee mug. These are 12 inches long by approximately 4 inches wide, and they stand less than 6 inches tall. And they're perfect for holding a book. Now, thank you for sticking around till the end. And if you haven't done so, I'd appreciate it if you hit that subscribe button if you feel that I've earned it, and maybe leave it a like. Those simple metrics encourage YouTube to promote this out to a larger base at no cost to you. There are very few things that bring me as much satisfaction as walking into my wood shop with an idea and a need, and then pulling out some old scrap wood and bringing that idea to life. Solving problems and figuring out how to get things to work is one of the most satisfying parts of woodworking, and that's what we're going to do today. So buckle up, because we're going to take just a few minutes and learn how to take some scrap wood and an idea and turn it into a unique and useful coat rack. And it's a coat rack that you really haven't seen before. So let's dive right in. Now, to begin with, I'm going to take some old white oak. This is a white oak board that I believe came out of a barn. So it is a scrap piece of wood. It's got some nails in it that I had to pull out, and I'm going to cut it down into 12-inch pieces, which you really don't need 12-inch pieces. I'm making it larger than it needs to be to begin with, knowing that I can trim it down later. Step one is to mill the wood, so let's plane it down in the thickness planer. Then I'll take it to the table saw and cut it down to 1.5-inch thick pieces. Now you'll notice right here that I'm actually using a thin rip jig. I actually like using the thin rip jig because it's a little bit quicker. Instead of having to accurately remeasure your rip fence every time your stock gets smaller, we just set the thin rip jig in the proper location, and then we push our rip fence up to keep it tight. Now notice that we keep the thin rip jig in front of the blade. You don't want to move it back into the blade, because that increases the possibility that you can have your material bind up and kick back. Once we have all of our pieces, then I'm just going to pull out the old palm router and a round over bit, and I'm going to break those hard edges. And let's come back to our scrap wood bin and find some old scraps of walnut, because we're going to use that as separators between each one of the spindles. I have a hard time throwing away hardwood, especially walnut. I keep even the smallest scraps. Then we'll bring that back over to the planer and mill that down. Now, the actual size really doesn't matter. You can do what you like. I'm making them 1.5 inches deep, which is the same depth as the spindles, and 3/4 of an inch wide, which is simply based on the thickness of the boards once they're plain. Once we have the majority of our pieces, let's lay everything out. pick the good sides and make sure that everything looks good. Since we're actually looking at the back of the coat rack now, any imperfections or knots can be right there in the back. Once we see how it lines up, let's get a quick measurement. And this is going to be our backer board. Now, there are actually going to be 3 pieces. There's going to be 1 piece at the bottom, which the spindles are going to bump up against to. And then we're going to have a French cleat on the top. So this makes it easy and very stable to be able to mount it to the wall. Now you can make this any width you like. You can also change it up a little bit, maybe put designs inside each of the separators, or have a key rack in the middle. And one thing that I've thought about doing is that in future builds of this. So I'm gonna clamp this up just so I can make sure that everything is nice and straight. And the next step is to pre-drill the holes and countersink. Now, I rushed through this a little bit. You'll notice that a couple of those screw holes aren't quite centered, but it's not a big deal. It still works fine. Once we have it pre-drilled, we're fine. Now, I realize that the spindles are taller than they really need to be, so I'm going to cut those down by about 3 inches. And I'm going to cut them at an angle so that when I pull it down, it butts up against the back of the coat rack. Then we're going to go over to the drill press and cut our holes, because we're just going to put a dowel through all these, and that's what's going to allow them to rotate. Now, in hindsight, I really should have put those dowel holes a little bit further down toward the bottom. You don't really see it in the video because I didn't film it, but these spindles don't like to drop the entire distance. And I did go back to my miter saw and I cut it so that those bottom angles were actually much closer to the dowel hole. From there, we're going to go ahead and assemble all of our spindles and separators. I'm just going to put a little paste wax on there to make it a little bit easier to get everything in. Now, there's no right or wrong as to the actual size of each one. I thought it would be interesting to have each spindle be taller or shorter. That's not necessarily a functional decision. I just thought it would look neat. And the dowels aren't quite long enough, but no big deal. When I get to the middle, I'll just stick one dowel into one side of that middle piece and the other into the other side. If everything's mounted and screwed and glued tight, shouldn't be a problem. So now that I see the way it's going to look, I'm going to do a quick little glue up here. And this piece is what the spindles are going to bump up against so that they don't hit the wall when you drop each one of those spindles. Now this is optional, but in case those spindles want to drop forward and they don't want to stand up straight, if you don't have it tight enough, you can put magnets in there and then put the corresponding magnet on the back of the spindle. That turns into a handy little feature that will help make sure all the spindles stay upright when they're not in use. We'll just use a little CA glue and accelerator, and now it's time to mount everything up. Just using 2 pieces of a French cleat, drop it into place, and we can now easily put all of our coats on our new fancy coat rack. Hey, thank you for sticking around for the entire video. And if you haven't done so, I'd appreciate it if you'd hit that subscribe button down below and maybe leave a like and a comment. Those simple little interactions encourage YouTube to promote this video out to a wider audience. And if you'd like to see more easy to create projects to improve your woodworking skills, take a look at the playlist in the description down below and in the pinned comment. Hey folks, Damien from Southpaw Designs, and today I thought I would bring a simple project to you that I did for a local church. I've actually already dropped off the full-size version. They wanted a larger version, but I decided to make a smaller version for myself just to kind of practice with first. And this is an Easter setup that could easily go on an altar or in the back of a church on a table or in somebody's home. Another thing that I like about this particular project is it's a project that you can do with very little skill. It's great for practicing basic woodworking skills. You can use a scroll saw, you can use a bandsaw, or you can use a CNC. Actually, I don't have a scroll saw or a bandsaw, so I designed this project using VCarve Pro, and then I cut it out on my CNC. But that said, again, you could easily draw this up and just use your bandsaw or a scroll saw to cut this out. And it's excellent practice for young woodworkers, for new woodworkers, maybe even your kids if they wanted to have a project to do in the shop. So here's all that it is. And there are a variety of ways to do this. So do it however you want to. Number one, you are going to have a way of cutting out the circle because here's the stone that gets rolled away. And obviously, if it gets rolled away, it needs to be a circle. And I just cut it off right there at the bottom so it would sit flush. All right. Next, we have the actual tomb itself, which is really just a hill with a slightly smaller circle cut out of it. You could possibly use the circle that you cut out for the stone, but that probably wouldn't work because you'd want it to be a little bit bigger. So it would actually cover it. Third, we have just a hill. It's hard to mess this one up. It's very simple, very easy to do. Then we have the cross. All right. Now the cross, I purposefully designed it to be a little bit off. It's not quite symmetrical because I didn't feel that a real cross would be perfect. So I've roughed it up. And then we have the slab right here. And I just cut that out. In fact, I used a CNC on this. So the slab can actually sit right back here. Now, the version that I gave to the church actually has a separate piece that's covered that you'll see right here in this photo. So the slab is actually a separate piece, and I stained it a darker color so it actually looks like it's the inside of a cave or the inside of a tomb. All right. Now, how did I actually do this? Number one, I designed it on the CNC, which I've already said. And then number two, what I decided to do was I decided to get 3/4 inch wood. I just got some panel boards, some shelving boards from my local big box store. Lowe's is where I go. And I just cut them to size, but I did 2 of them because I wanted it to be a little thicker so it would stand up on its own. Now, if you wanted to, you could also do it just a single thickness, but then maybe make another piece at the bottom to serve as a stabilizer so it would sit up straight. But this project ended up being a very good project. All in all, this particular version, it cost maybe about $20 to buy the materials. And that's because I decided to go ahead and get finished boards. And I wanted to get something that was a little bit nicer. I decided not to use plywood or MDF or something like that. I wanted to use actual wood. So it cost a little bit more. So like I said, it cost about $20 in materials, but you could turn around and sell this for probably $75 to $100 once you actually finished it. Now, you would want to finish it and stain it, as you see in the picture that I posted along with this. But this is a very simple project to do. It's very easy to resize it, to move everything around, to flip it over, to get different looks for this particular project that you could use in a variety of different ways. So it's a very flexible project and a good project for somebody who is a starting woodworker. Really, all that you have to make sure that you do is get your hills right, make sure you sand everything down good, and then choose a good finish. What I did is I chose to make all of the other pieces a darker color, and then the tomb itself was lighter so that it kind of stood out. So this is a great project for either for gifts for your local church or something that you can actually turn around and fabricate and sell and make several of in a fairly short period of time. So hope you liked it. Show me some of your favorite projects or tell me some of the things that you like doing down in the comments. And as always, if you haven't subscribed, please do so. Remember that subscriptions are the way that YouTube knows that the content that I put out is valuable. So are comments and likes. So any interaction with the page, if you feel I've earned it, is greatly appreciated. Thank you guys, and have a great holiday season. Hey folks, Damien from Southpaw Designs. I'm always on the lookout for creating new types of projects that are going to grab my customers' attention, that are going to be easy to create, and that are going to lead to increased sales. So if that's something that you're interested in, just watch on, because we're going to create a really cool project that you can create with or without a CNC machine. And I'm going to talk about how to do it both ways. So let's go ahead and dig right in. To begin with, you'll notice that this piece of walnut that I'm going to use is pretty warped. Instead of taking it to the jointer and planer, I'm just going to screw it down to my CNC and use a surfacing bit to give me a flat surface. Then I'll take it over to the planer and then plane it down to what I need. Now, if you're ever using this method, make sure that you countersink those screws down pretty deep, because if your surfacing bit runs over those screws, it's going to cause some problems. Going to use a shim to hold up that edge so that it will surface it to a nice flat surface, and then we just let it run. Now you'll notice right here, I may need to adjust my feeds and speeds, because every time that surfacing bit stops in a corner, it's leaving a little burn mark. I can plane that off, and I will, but I want to eliminate that. From there, since I have one flat surface, I'll move over to my planer, and I'll just plane the other side to get it down to the thickness that I want. And we will now cut it down to size. Now, this maple that I have is plenty flat enough. There are no warps in it, but I still need to plane it down to the same thickness as my walnut. And then let's bring it over to the assembly table and figure out which direction I like best. Now, this walnut does have a little bit of some knot holes in it that I'm going to have to use some epoxy to fill up. I'll do that later on. Form a simple glue up. And under my culls, I like to put a little bit of wax paper in case there's any glue that gets stuck to those culls. When I take them off, it's possible that some of the wood could actually stick to my board. And while you can break it off and sand it down, I prefer to not deal with that anyway. All right, we've used the magic of video to dry everything off, let's take it off. And that wax paper did a good job of keeping the glue from adhering the culls. And now we're going to take it over to our CNC and make our pocket. Now you're going to see that there is a big mistake that I make here. Best I can figure is I didn't tighten my bowl bit down enough into the collet, and all of a sudden things kind of go awry. And there you have it. The bit slipped, it dropped, and ruined this piece of wood. That just sucks, but you live and learn. Thankfully, I didn't break the bit and I didn't damage the CNC, but this section of wood is pretty much useless. Instead of scrapping the entire piece, I'm going to take it back over to the table saw and I'm going to cut that walnut off and try to reuse that. Now, I'm not going to go through the entire process again showing you a glue up, but I just grab a new piece of maple for the middle and re-glue everything and then let that dry. All right, once the new glue up is dried, let's try this again. I'm going to slow down the speed on my bowl bit, and I'm also taking off the dust protection so you can see it. Now, I like to do two passes here. The first one is going to be a rough pass. It's going to get rid of the most material. I'm going at about a 40% step over. So it's going to remove a decent amount of material pretty quickly, but you'll notice that it gives a lot of those little ridges on there that we're going to need to get rid of later on. Okay, once we're finished, we're going to do the same thing again, except we're going to turn our step over down to about 10%. So it's going to give a nice smooth finish, as you can see right there. It's going to get rid of all those ridges. And we can go a little bit faster because we're only going about an extra 0.01 inches. From there, switch over to a 1/4 inch bit. My downcut bit is pretty rough right now. I've got to order a new one, so I'm just using an upcut. No problem, I can just sand that off. And this is going to be the hole that the dowel is going to fit into. And then the final step of cutting this out is actually going to create the profile. I always like to do that profile last. So when the bowl is doing its cutting, it's going to have the maximum amount of hold. So there's very little chance of anything breaking loose. If you were to do your profile first, then you run into a higher likelihood of your workpiece breaking off. Also, right now, I'd like to take just a moment to ask you if you're getting anything useful out of this, please hit that like button down there and leave a comment. Those metrics tell YouTube that this is valuable and encourages them to share it out to a broader base. And if you haven't already done so, please subscribe. I'm trying to build this channel, and those interactions really help out. So let's go ahead and get back to it. Then we'll start cutting our circles. And we're going to have several little rings that are going to go around the dowel, both to hold the trays in place and then also with little separators to keep the trays from dropping down onto our charcuterie board. I'm going to make a total of 4 of them, 2 in walnut, and then I'm going to make 2 more in maple, but I won't show you that because you get the idea. And then we move to our last cutout, which are going to be our trays. Now this is simply a shape. You can customize this shape however you like, but you need to have a slot, or I'm sorry, a pocket for your bowls. And now I'm not going to try to do a pocket. I'm just doing the inner profile because to try to bore out that entire pocket would take forever. When it comes to the smaller hole, however, I would recommend that you actually use a pocket to get rid of everything. And you'll see why here in just a minute. There are 2 reasons for that. One, when I'm cutting out those interior profiles, there's such a small piece of wood that's left over that it tends to break off, and that could potentially damage your project. 2, because of the fact that I like to leave tabs in there, those tabs are stuck and they're a pain to get rid of in a hole that small. So I just recommend using the extra 2 or 3 minutes that it takes just to pocket out that small hole so you don't have to go back in and get rid of all that and then risk having those small pieces break loose. Now we'll come over to the sander and clean up those edges and especially get rid of the tabs. Now for the larger pocket, I'm just going to use the spindle sander to get rid of that interior. This is what I was talking about. To try to do this on the small pocket that's going to fit over the dowel is just incredibly difficult to do. And in the time that it would take to just pocket out, bore out that entire hole, it's going to save you a lot of hassle. So that's the way I recommend you do that. And this is exactly what I'm talking about. Trying to clean off the little bit of those tabs is such a pain, it's really not worth it. It would have been quicker just to pocket out that entire hole and then move on. Once we have all the pieces cut and sanded, let's do a little dry fit. One thing I forgot to record is that bottom ring right there. I actually put a dowel into the larger dowel to hold that in place. From there, I'm just going to use some mineral oil this time. I use Odie's oils quite a bit, but I decided to use mineral oil this time just to see what it would look like and be a little bit different. And the mineral oil turned out really nice, but I think I am going to go back to the Odie's oil for these types of things. I just like Odie's oil. I'm not paid by Odie's at all. I just like it. Set everything out to dry. And then let's take some mineral oil to our board itself. Actually going to do 2 coats of this, and then let's move on to assembling everything together. We put each of our trays in, separated by one of our little walnut separators, and then we'll put the last ring on top. Now, you'll notice that it's a little bit wobbly. I can cut down the size of the hole into the board just a little bit, but I want it to be loose enough that it will fit down inside there with a little friction fit. The top, however, I didn't like the fact that it was wobbly, so I decided to glue that on, that top ring. So it actually holds all of the trays in place. And instead of using wood glue, I just decided to use some CA glue because that will lessen the likelihood that it will drip down onto the tray and glue those in place. And once we're finished, here we go. There are some improvements that could be made, but overall, I think this is a great project. Hey folks, Damien from Southpaw Designs. And if there's one thing that I've figured out in my business journey, whether it's my previous business in web development or my current side business in woodworking, it's that you need unique ideas to set you apart from the pack. And so that's what we're going to look at today. We're going to look at a pretty standard project that you can create on your own that has a couple of unique features that sets it apart from the pack. So let's go ahead and dig right in. So to begin with, let's mill our wood. I'm using the DeWalt 735 planer. I love this. I just upgraded to it. I'll put a link in the description if you're interested in checking it out. And I also want to cut this down to about a 1/2 inch thickness. Now, I don't have a good enough bandsaw to resaw, especially something as hard as walnut. So I use my table saw to do that. Be very careful if you're using this method. Notice I am using a push stick. And in watching this video, I did notice that I think the push stick is too close to the blade. So I need to pull that up a little bit. So just keep that in mind. All right, let's go ahead and sand our wood down. Now to get rid of any of those blade marks, I'm going to sand it with an 80 grit, then a 120, and then I'll raise the grain and sand to a 220. That's the way I prefer to sand walnut. And let's go ahead and cut it down to our final sizes right here. Once we have all of our pieces cut, and I'm not giving you an actual diagram or file for it because you can tweak this however you want to. But I'm going to have 3 different sections, and I just want to make sure that everything kind of lines up and matches up. I've also cut some extra pieces down there, as you can see, that'll be used for some trim. All right, next step is to cut our miters. This is how the box is going to be held together. And now let's go to our router table and cut some slots. This is where the separators inside the caddy are going to sit. And right here on the front, we're going to put a couple of dados right there, and you'll see what we're going to do with those here in just a minute. To assemble everything, I'm just going to use some blue tape, lay everything out, and then perform a simple glue up. Now, I'm not closing this into a complete box because of the faceplates that we're going to look at here in just a minute. I'm just doing the front 3 sides, and then we will glue the 4th part right into one of those dados. Is that a dado or a rabbit? I always get them confused. I think it's a dado. So let's just simply glue up the rest of our... Now, you may or may not want to actually glue up your inserts. You can always just drop those in. I think it would be just as stable either way. I chose to go ahead and glue it up. Notice how I'm not using the outer dado yet. That's going to be for our faceplates. And I left a little extra room. I could possibly trim that bottom or that top out. And it turns out, after thinking about it, I really don't need that tape on top anyway, so I got rid of that. And now let's clamp it up and let it dry. Got a couple of knot holes inside this base, and so I'm just going to use some epoxy to fill those up. Always like to take a lighter or a torch of some sort and get any bubbles out of there. So now let's start assembling everything together. The base is going to be a solid piece of walnut, although I think I would rather do it different and actually have a slot. And we'll talk about that more here in just a minute when we get into creating our um, faceplates. I don't have any straws. Straws are good for getting rid of extra glue, so I'll just use a marking knife, which allows me to get in those corners. And now let's go ahead and cut the trim that's going to serve as the top to cover up some of our cut marks. Now for this, I'm just going to use some CA glue, put everything together that way. And then I'll use wood glue to attach it to the top. I'm going to try to stay away from using any kind of brad nails because this is a small item. Also, the wood glue should give it plenty of stability. And I'll use a little CA glue just so it'll solidify very quickly and give me a nice tight finish. Okay, from there, let's go ahead and start making the faceplates. Now, this is actually just a mess up from a previous project, which is why you want to hold on to those scraps, because as you can see, that's a clock face that I was working on. So now, what's the unique little twist that we're talking about here? It's the fact that I've created several different faceplates that can easily be swapped out. Now, to start off with, I just have a simple one that says Utensils, and then another one that has my last name, and it can easily be dropped in. But the cool thing about this is that you can take this same idea and apply it for different holidays. You can have a Christmas face, you can have a Halloween face, you can have a summer face, fall, autumn, spring, so that you can constantly be changing these out to give your buyers a unique showpiece in their house that looks different with every season. All right, now let's move to the CNC. This part's optional, but I really like this. This is the part that's going to set this project apart from somebody else and add that unique feature. While the CNC is doing its thing, let's go ahead and sand off our top there. Get rid of those sharp edges. I like to have just a little bit of I guess you'd call it a bevel or call it a chamfer on there, but I just use sandpaper because I want it to be very slight. Now, once the faceplate's done, let's pop it off of our CNC. Move back to our table and use some black epoxy to fill that in and make it look nice and pretty. We'll do the same thing to our second faceplate. If you notice, to get into those small little areas of the letters, I'm just using a toothpick. Actually, it's not a toothpick. It's a little scrap of wood that really is just a toothpick. Now we'll let everything set up overnight. And I like to use Odie's oil on walnut. It's natural. I love the smell of it, and it really makes walnut look beautiful. Now, what else can we actually do with this other than just have a typical caddy? So how could you take this design and actually tweak it just a little bit to make other things out of it? Number one, you could make it a little bit smaller, change the design a little bit, but keep the idea of the unique faceplates and turn it into a key rack and mail letter holder. Number two, we could easily change the size of a couple of these sections inside and turn one piece of it into a knife holder. Now, an easy way to do that is just to buy a whole bunch of bamboo skewers. You can get them in packs of thousands and fill one section with bamboo skewers, packed pretty tight, and then you're able to just set your knives down inside of them. So you've created your own knife holder instead of having to have a knife block with the slots pre-cut in. Now, another option that you can use to create this a little bit more unique, and one thing that I'll do in my next iteration of this particular project is instead of having just the face plates that sit off to the side, I'm going to redesign this a little bit so that there will be an empty pocket either on the side or possibly in the back, that when I'm not using the extra plates, I can just slide them into the caddy so that they're always out of the way. Now, this would require me to maybe make it about an inch taller if I had 4 or 5 different plates, but that's something that you can easily adjust instead of having the solid bottom like I do right here. And as always, if you feel that I've earned it, I'd appreciate a like down below. Leave a comment, even if it's just saying good job or this could be better. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't. And please watch till the end, because those metrics tell YouTube that this is valuable content and encourages them to push it out to a wider audience. And always, I put links down in the description for any of the tools or materials that I actually use. They are affiliate links, so if you do choose to buy any of them, I'd appreciate it if you buy them through those links. That's a free way for you to support this channel. Buying through those links costs you nothing extra, but it does support the channel because I get a small commission off of those sales. So are you always on the lookout for good money-making projects that you can make in your shop without any kind of advanced tools? Well, if so, stick around, because today I'm going to show you how I put $15 worth of material into a project that sells for $150 or more. It's a simple wine caddy that can easily be used for picnics or out on the beach. Now, these particular types of caddies sell online for $150 to $200 each. However, it only takes about $15 worth of material, and that includes some pretty nice hardwood like maple and walnut. All right, so I failed to record the first part, but all I've done here is done a simple glue up with about 9 inches of spalted maple there in the middle and 3 inches on the front and back of black walnut. I think it just gives it a neat look. I'm sanding it to 120 grit right now, and then we will raise the grain by just simply wiping it down. It also cleans off any kind of leftover sawdust. Then we'll let that dry and then sand to a 220. That gives it a nice buttery smooth finish. Once we have the bottom tray finished, now it's time to make the top part. So I'm going to cut that down to size, about 26 inches, using my miter saw. Then I'm going to take it over to the planer, trim it down to about 3/4 of an inch. Now, you do see a lot of dust flying out. It was just clogged up at this point. You'll see that later on I actually clean it out. And now we're going to use the table saw to cut this down to about 5 inches deep. And then I'm also going to do a glue up with another piece of walnut to give a similar look up there. Now, I don't have a jointer, so to get a nice clean edge for jointing for doing my glue up, I'm just using my CNC. Again, you don't have to have a CNC for this type of a project, but since I have one, I'm going to use it. And you'll notice it gives a great joint right there. Both of those sides were done with a CNC, and that's about perfect. From there, let's do a simple glue up. You know what that looks like, so I won't waste a lot of time. What I will do is mention that I like to use wax paper on my pipe clamps when I'm doing a glue up. That helps to limit the amount of glue that gets on the clamps, and then also the cauls themselves, which makes it easier to get those cauls off with the minimum amount of sanding. Clamp everything up nice and tight, let it dry overnight. Then we take everything apart and revel at our greatness. Now, there's a little bit of dried glue on there. I keep a hand plane blade handy so that I can use that. I found that's just as good of a way to get rid of those little glue drops as anything. Then I am going to take it back over to my planer and I'm going to give it a couple finishing passes just to clean that up slightly. And you'll notice sawdust was cleaned out. From there, we'll sand it down to a 220, just as we did before. I won't go through that process again, but that's what we do. Now, once we have those pieces, you do not have to use a CNC to do this, but since I have one, I'm going to. You can easily use a circle cutting jig or any other method that you want. All you have to do is be able to cut a couple of circles out. The diameter of those circles are going to vary depending on the size bottles you have. Then we also need to cut out the tracks for the glasses to sit in. And then once we have that done, I'm just going to use a palm router. It ends up being just as quick as a CNC to get this part done. So that's going to give a nice little rounded edge there. And then once again, you don't have to have a CNC. You can easily use a jigsaw or any other kind of saw to cut these out or a drill press. But I like to have just a little pocket there and not cut all the way through. So I'm using a 3/4 inch bowl bit so that I can have those handles there, but still have the top side maximum surface for a serving area. All right, I've got a couple of dowels. I'm going to put these in at about 9 inches. The height will vary depending on the size glasses that you want it to work for. But for me, 9 inches was a good height. Now, when you glue these together, make sure that they are at a 90-degree angle. The last thing you'd like to see is for them to be really wonky and your top tray tilted one way or the other. You also have the opportunity, if you don't want to glue them up, you can screw them in so that you can take it apart. But I like the idea of it staying nice and sturdy. So once we have everything together, I'm going to apply some Odie's oil here. I love Odie's oil for this type of project. It's my preferred finish. In hindsight, the next time I do this, I will apply the Odie's before I assemble everything because that made it a little bit more difficult. And there you go. That walnut and spalted maple sure is beautiful. And then now finally, we're going to put some little simple rubber feet on there. If you'd like to pick any of these up, again, there is a link also down in the description for you. And here we go. It's nice and finished. Looks pretty. You see the hand grips underneath. And hopefully my friend's baby mama will love it. Damien from Southpaw Designs, and check this out. Just got finished with this fun little project that I saw an example of online. So I decided to design it in VCarve Pro and see if I can get this bad boy up and going. So today you're going to learn how to create this from start to finish. And also, just because I love you guys so much, I'm going to put these design files on my website for free, so you can download these for free. I do encourage you to watch all the way through because there are several things that you will need to know about how you're going to design it and put it together in terms of the proportions and in terms of the width and just some design aspects that will help you do a better job in making one of these. Let me know what your thoughts are down in the comments, and if you end up making it, I'd love for you guys to shoot me an email with pictures of your results and your modifications and your success stories. So let's go ahead and dig right in. So to begin with, we're going to plane the wood that we're going to use for our brackets. And guess what this wood is? It's pine, but I just got it from a couple of fence pickets. Turns out if you're looking for thin, cheap wood, fence pickets are a good way to go. Once we have our wood planed and down, I'm going to cut out the brackets. We'll need 10 of them. For something as small as this, I typically like to use the CA glue and tape or double-sided tape method so they'll hold on to the board. And once we have those taken care of, now we're going to start cutting out our plug covers, which actually I won't use, but we'll look more at that a little bit later. Now, I don't have a really high-end bandsaw, so I have to resaw with my table saw. Going to use the same method, CA glue and tape, because these are going to be cut out. Now, I will add tabs onto the bottom of them, but anything small like this, I usually like to use CA glue and tape so everything stays more secure. Once we have everything down and we've probed our CNC, the Onefinity is my CNC of choice. I use a Onefinity Woodworker X50. I won't show you all these. You get the idea. I'll speed through them and do some time lapse. There's going to be a pocket, and then we will cut out the plugs, leave a little tab on there so they don't fly all over the place. Okay, once we have our 10 plug cutters, I'll use my reciprocating saw to cut those out. We do need to take them over to the sander and sand those off to try to clean those up a little bit. Now, if you're doing this, be careful because I tell you what, I've lost some fingerprints trying to sand off these little bitty things. If you guys have a better method for sanding little bitty things like this, please let me know because I can't figure out a good way to do it other than hand sanding, which takes forever. From there, we're going to go ahead and plane down just a couple of 2x4s. I decided to try pine 2x4s for my for my trays, and they work just fine. Now, I don't know what your philosophy is on combining hardwood and softwood, walnut and pine, but the finished product actually looks pretty good. I should probably use something like maple or oak. Let me know what you would do. Now, these pockets are going to be cut to whatever width you need based on the size jars that you're actually going to be using. I'll place a link down in the description for the jars that I'm using, just so you know. And if you download the design files, those match up with the jars that I'm using. Now, right here, I actually made kind of a mistake. I'll talk about it later, but I shouldn't have cut my trays that close. I should have left a little bit more space so I could actually put the plug covers on them. But you live and learn. It still looks good when all's said and done. All right, once we have everything cut to length, I'll measure them up and take them to the table saw and cut them to width. We want to make sure that we have the exact same size on both sides of those pockets so that we know it will sit flat and won't tilt from one side to the other. Once we have all 5 of them cut out, we will just do a quick little sanding there. Now, I like to sand with 120 and then raise the grain and then do another sanding to 220. All right, so now about those free design files. I'm going to put them in the description below. It will be a link that takes you to my website. You will have to place an order, but it's a free order and it won't cost you anything. And it'll also ask you for an email and blah, 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 all that stuff because it's considered a purchase. But I don't do any kind of marketing or anything like that. So you're never going to get an email from me or anything like that. So that's where you're going to go to download those free files. But one thing that I do want to ask of you guys, that's what I'm giving to you. What I ask you guys to do for me is hit that like button, leave a comment, subscribe if you haven't, and please, please watch the video till the end because those 4 metrics really tell YouTube that this is valuable content and encourages them to keep on promoting the channel and promoting the video out there. So thank you all for everything and let's get back to it. Next, we need to cut our side pieces. Going to use some walnut here and go ahead and plane that down. I use the DeWalt 735. I just upgraded from the 734. I've actually got a video comparing the 735 and 734. And boy, I love that 735. There is a boatload of difference if you're ever in the market. Now ignore the dust. I do have a substandard dust collection. Now these will be the sides. I should have put 3 pockets in them. One for the crossbar and then 2 more at the bottom to hold the design together. I have to fix that later on, but in the final design, I've actually put a couple more pockets down there. Once we're finished, we will take them off And finally, the last step is creating our wheels. Now, one of the reasons I'm giving away these design files for free is because you can take this basic design and do any number of things with it. You can change these designs. You can really decorate it up. I really want to encourage you guys to do some crazy things with them, and I'd love to see them. So if you create any of these, please feel free to drop me a line on my website or comment on my channel. I'd love to see some of the projects that you guys come up with. And as always, I do get the question every once in a while, these design files, take them, make money with them, just don't resell them. But anything that you make, make some money off those. Next, we will actually do kind of a dry fit to put these together and get our spacing. I'm using some paste wax to help get those a little bit in tighter. Now, this axle that we're using does need to be pretty tight because you don't want the two wheels to be able to spin independently. They need to stay pretty stationary so that your trays don't get cockeyed. I just realized that I put both of them on backwards. So now let's take them off and just flip them over and try that again because I'm a dumbass. Let's just do a little dry fit and see how everything works, and it looks good. So next we need to line up our brackets. And again, you want to make sure that the brackets are all evenly lined up so that way you can glue them on or nail them or use dowels or however you prefer to do it. But we want to make sure that they're nice and even so it will sit flat and doesn't lean to one side or the other. I'm just going to use some Titebond 2 and then use the little pistol grip clamps to hold that on there so they can dry. Now we'll let them dry. I set them all nice and pretty so I could look like a professional YouTuber. Ignore the orange one. I only have 4. Now I'm going to measure and put the last 2 pockets in there that I told you a minute ago I forgot about. And I'll just go to the drill press and do that at this point. Okay, and we're going to need 10 dowels. I'm using 1/2-inch dowels. We're going to make each of them about 1 inch long. Those are going to be what holds the trays in place. So I'm just going to cut 10 1-inch marks and then go to the bandsaw and actually cut them off. Now you'll notice that I made these pockets a little bit too big. I have corrected those in the design. I used 1/2-inch dowels, but I think I made those pockets about 0.6. So I actually went back in and went a little bit deeper with 1/2-inch pockets further inside. So they do actually hold where they need to. Once they're dried, how's that for time lapse? Let's put everything together. Those dowels do need to line up. Now let's do a dry fit and see how everything goes. And we can always adjust them.